Aloha mai kako. I want to greet and welcome our visitors to the American Association of Geographers website and webinar series. It's been a wonderful series that we've orchestrated as a lead up in preparation for the upcoming conference here in Honolulu in the month of April. My name is Neil Hannes. I have a company called Ho'okele Strategies, and I've been retained by the AAG to assist in kind of making the local connections here. And we've had a terrific webinar series. This is the ninth and final part of our series, and we've covered everything from really the host-guest relationship to Hawaii's view of creation of these islands and how we first inhabited it, and how that inhabitation kind of strayed and moved to manipulate and distort systems in ways that we are now trying to recalibrate and restore. We've talked about agricultural systems. We've talked about pono science in our last the right way, kind of an appropriate way to do science that accommodates indigenous wisdom and incorporates that into findings and into process. So we've had a number of wonderful webinars that we invite you to either, if you miss them in the live, you can catch them on the website and view them at your leisure as a really build up of anticipation and excitement, as well as content that's going to be important for you to get the most out of your Hawaii experience. Today we have Kabilau Wright here, and we're really pleased to have her. And she's going to give you a view of the Waikīkī that you will see and exist in, and really how that's changed over time. And you will suddenly be a part of something, this change process that kind of goes back in history, but also I think as we look forward to what Waikiki becomes in the future is important to those of us here in the island. So we're pleased to have Kabilau. She's an assistant professor at the Kamakaku'okalani Center for Hawaiian Studies in the Hawaii Nui a Kea School of Hawaiian Knowledge at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. She earned her PhD in the Geography and Environment Department at the University of Hawaii. And the areas of Kabilau's research include land tenure and land laws in the Hawaiian Kingdom and territorial periods, as well as political geography and indigenous studies. So Kabilau has an interesting presentation for us today, and we invite you to, at any point in time that you have questions, please put them into the Q&A feature of Zoom, and we'll do our best to get to those at the end of the presentation. She'll have about an hour's worth of content, and we're going to save 15, 20 minutes at the end to make sure that we engage our audience and respond to your questions. So with that introduction, Kabilau, really pleased to have you here and aware of your body of work and anxious to hear about it.
Thank you very much, Neil. Aloha, everybody. I'm just going to jump right in. Give me a minute here to share my screen. All right.
We can see it fine, Kabilau.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So, the title of my presentation is The Remaking of Hawaii into Someone Else's Paradise via Territorial Land Law Changes. So this territorial land law, this territorial period speaks specifically to the post 1893 time period. And this would be after the illegal overthrow or the coup that overthrew our Hawaiian Kingdom government. So I'm just going to jump right in. Okay, so some of what I'm going to be talking about builds upon our traditional land divisions, and I know that there have been other webinars that have spoken about these land divisions. These divisions offered ways to help manage different areas of each island. This is a very basic map of Oahu and showing the moku or the larger districts here. So let's see. So just to familiarize you, Waikīkī is in this area here, part of the Konamoku. And that's where you will be, well, when you come over for AAG. And then we have smaller land divisions called Ahupua'a. And I'm going to zoom in here. I know it's hard to see likely, but the words going this way, these are all different Ahupua'a. So these land divisions actually allowed for more specific, place-specific type of land management and natural resource management. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people in the conservation realm are really looking to Ahupua'a as a way to inform how we move forward, maybe looking at managing resources using the Ahupua'a system or basing it on the Ahupua'a system, because it really was something that allowed our people to thrive for a couple thousand years. All right, so I have to say that this image here, this one, I hope you can see my mouse. This one here, I show this image all over the world. And I mean, including all the way places like in the middle of a rainforest in Aotearoa, where they don't have televisions in their homes. And everybody knows where this place is. It is shocking to me all the time how recognizable this mountain range is. This mountain is called Leahi or Leahi. Of course, most people refer to it as Diamond Head. And so you can see, this is a pretty current, relatively current picture of Waikīkī. The one underneath of it, I like better because it does actually show some of the sprawl, right? Most of these are condos and hotels that cater to our tourist market here in Waikīkī. The actual name Waikīkī, Wai means water, and Kiki means to bubble up. So the definition really is spouting waters. When we look at these pictures of Waikīkī, you might wonder, what the heck? Why was it called spouting waters? Because you don't really see anything that would explain the use of these words or this word to describe Waikīkī. The nice thing about traditional place names is that they definitely inform what the place was originally before all the development that took place.
And
This is
Kalamai,
certainly,
Kavilau, I don't mean, before you leave depart from that slide, Kavilau,
yes,
the conventioners, conferees will be staying at the Hilton Hawaiian Village. So you
correct.
might point that out on there
So
it
the
is by that.
Hilton, right here, it's right
That's where they'll
this
be.
area. That's where you'll be staying.
And just off the screen, kind of at 7 o'clock or so,
Mhm.
I believe is the convention center
Yep,
where,
that's
where they'll be
exactly
holding
right.
their conference. So
Yep,
there, I just want to give them a little frame of reference. Thank you.
thank you. All right, so if we take a look at this photo is of Waikīkī. You can see Leahi in the background there. This photo was taken sometime between 1893 and 1905. I actually think it's closer to the 1905 time period. And the reason for that is you can take a look at this label here that says Honolulu from Punch Bowl. So Punch Bowl is a mountain or a pu'u that we call it a pu'u. And of course, Punch Bowl is not the original name of that place. Original name of that place is Pu'awaina. So the fact that he's got it, the photographer's got it listed as Punch Bowl tells me that it's probably a little bit later than 1893. But in any event, if you look at this, all of these light colored areas here, all of these light colored areas are water, right? All of these light colored areas are water. And that's because Waikīkī was a wetland. Waikīkī was a wetland, and the water that was there enabled wet agriculture. So there was traditionally lots of what we call lo'ikalo, which are taro patch or taro growing complexes, as well as fish ponds. So there was agriculture and aquaculture going on in Waikīkī. And the source of the water, there are valleys that are if we're looking at this picture, on the left-hand side, you would see valleys, and there are a number of streams that fed right into Waikīkī, but there were also a lot of springs. And that's where the term Waikīkī comes from. The bubbling up of water is talking about the springs that were there and continued to produce or provide fresh water so that there could be lots of agriculture and aquaculture going on. It really was a food production center for this island. Very, very important food production area. All right, this map here shows some traditional land use. This map is from 1881. And I know that it's likely you can't see all of the writing, but I wanted to point out some of these shapes to you. So for instance, this shape here, these shapes here, as well as all of these roundish here, all of these roundish shapes, what they are fish ponds. They're fish ponds. Our fish pond systems worked together with our taro patch systems that were mauka or mountainside of it. And these were aquaculture at its finest. I mean, when you think about all of these squares up here, many of them were taro patch systems, and the water would go through the taro patches, come down, run down into these local or these fish ponds, and provide nutrients for algae to grow that in turn provided food for the herbivorous fish that were raised in them. So there were up to 30 working fish ponds in Waikīkī traditionally, and not just on the shoreline, but also you can see in here, these are all also fish ponds, and they were able to have them inland up here as well. They were able to have them inland because of the just sheer amount of spring and surface water that was coming through Waikīkī, running from the mountains down to the shoreline. This is another picture, kind of a this one is taken around 1920. Now 1920, these light colored patches up here, again, all water. That's reflection from water. Waikīkī is right down here in this area. And these are all taro patches. Taro, by this time, there's some rice. There's a lot of rice being grown here as well. And that's what all of this is too, wetland agriculture. This is in the area known as Mo'iliili, as well as Makiki. So just the sheer amount of food production is very obvious in these photos. And again, this is 1920, right? So you can tell that well after the overthrow, there are still a lot of food being produced here in Waikīkī. I wanted to point out one other thing. Now, if you look at Waikīkī, I know it's a black and white photo, so it's hard to see, but the actual shoreline here, there isn't much sand. And that continues all the way down the coastline of Waikīkī. Traditionally, there wasn't much sand there. So when you come to Waikīkī and you are sitting on Waikīkī Beach, please just know that that is an engineered shoreline. The sand was actually brought in from other places in order to make that beach wider. But traditionally, it simply was a very narrow strip of sand. All right. So how does this happen, right? If you think about the historic photos that I just showed, and then think back to the original photos that I showed, how does this happen, right? How is it that the food production area was turned into and developed into a tourist mecca? Well, this happened as a result of land legislation that was passed in 1895, 2 years after the illegal overthrow or the coup. And we can read through Act 61. It's an act to provide for the improvement of land in the District of Honolulu, deleterious to public health, and for the creation and foreclosure of liens to secure the payment of the expense so incurred. So I'll just read a little bit more. Whenever in the opinion of the Board of Health, any tract or parcel of land situated in the District of Honolulu, Island of Oahu, shall be deleterious to the public health in consequence of being low and at times covered or partly covered by water, or of being situated between high and low water mark, or of being improperly drained, or incapable by reasonable expenditure of effectual drainage, or for other reason in an unsanitary or dangerous condition, it shall be the duty of the Board of Health to report such fact to the Minister of the Interior, together with a brief recommendation of the operation deemed advisable to improve such land. So that basically what it amounts to is the Board of Health was able to say that any property on the island of Oahu could be deemed unsafe or dangerous to the public health because there's water on it. Whether that water is ocean water, whether that water is stream water, whether that water is stagnant water, it didn't matter. That the person who's running the Board of Health can determine that it is a danger to public health, and they could report that to the Minister of the Interior, and they would come up with a plan to, finger quotes, improve that land. Now, what this means in terms of Waikīkī is that because of all that water on the land, in the form of taro patches and fish ponds, etc., all of that could be deemed deleterious to public health. Now, remember, this act went into effect in 1895, and it wasn't leveraged until a couple decades later in order to develop Waikīkī. But you can see very clearly how early on they were sort of, when I say they, I'm talking about the usurpers government, how they are starting to see Hawaii and planning the remaking of Hawaii, especially in the Waikīkī area. And I do have to say one other thing. Many of you probably have not had the privilege of being in a lo'ikalo or a taro patch. Well, I have. And I can tell you that taro will not grow if water is stagnant. If water is stagnant, the taro will just rot. Taro has to have cool, moving water in order to grow. Likewise with rice. And so these were not stagnant. These were not stagnant ponds, if you will, that we looked at in those photos. These were gravity-fed and engineered, really, food production systems that leveraged elevations so that the water went from upland gradually down and through these patches, and then eventually ending up in the fish ponds, carrying all of the nutrients for those herbivorous fish. Around the early 1900s, the government starts to refer to Waikīkī as a swamp. And like I just told you, when I think about the word swamp and the connotations that come along with, swamps to me mean stagnant water, right? And again, there is no way that food was going to be produced in those complexes if the water wasn't moving. So this was it was a part of this process. Calling Waikīkī a swamp sort of contributed to the fact that then the Board of Health could say this is dangerous because of mosquitoes. And so you start to see, if you can go on into newspaper archives and type in the word mosquito, and you will come up with dozens and dozens of articles like this one that was published in 1902. And you can see that they're talking about how dangerous mosquitoes are. And the reason that they're saying this is because what their case is that they feel, or they're telling people that it could be that someday the malaria mosquito will get to Hawaii. And if that was to happen, then that's so dangerous, and really could be devastating. And so this is the justification. This is the justification. And I mean, I believe outright fear mongering. The mosquito has never made it to Hawaii. The malaria mosquito has never made it to Hawaii. But it was a way to justify the use of Act 61 in order to obtain, for the government to obtain land. Oh, let me get back here. Now, for Waikīkī, what this means is once they start the process of calling the lands deleterious to public health, what that means and what Act 61 allows for is the plan that was put together by the Minister of the Interior in order to improve these lands and make them safe was that the owners of each of the properties had to raise the surface level of their property by 5 to 7 feet. Now, that might not sound like much, right? But if we imagine you're a taro farmer, right? And you have a taro patch that is 1 acre in size. Now, I will say this, most of the taro complexes were much larger than this, but just for sake of our example, if you can imagine what an acre looks like, and then think about raising the level of the surface, coming up with enough fill to raise the surface level of the property by 5 to 7 feet at your own expense. That is something that most of the landowners in this area were just not able to do. Now, if they couldn't afford to do it, the government did allow for, they would pay for it, but then they would put a lien on your property. And if you're a taro farmer or a fish pond, somebody who's managing or owns a fish pond, then your livelihood is taken away anyway. So it's really important to sort of think about the results of this, right? That most of the people who are growing food via fish ponds and taro patches or rice patches end up leaving. And really the only Native Hawaiians that are able to hold on to land are the ones that have capital so that they can pay for this process. They can pay for the pumping of fill onto their property. So that would be big entities such as Bishop Estates, Kamehameha Schools. They own property there, and they were able to leverage or able to pay for that to be done. So we do see that land ownership changes hands relatively quickly once this process begins. And the way, so the way that this happens is, because you like me are, I'm sure, asking, where's all this fill going to come from? So what they did was the government contracted a man named Dillingham to fill, to pump and fill these springs, right, to clog them by raising the level of the surface 5 to 7 feet. And what he does, because remember now we have two water sources. We have spring water, which will be solved. It will be handled by clogging the springs and raising the surface of the property. But we also have surface water. And so what they do is they dig the Alawai Canal. This is a canal. You'll see it for sure in Waikīkī. And what they do is they dig that, dredge that, create this canal, and divert all of the surface water into the canal, and then but when they dredged it, they took all of that fill, pumped it up onto the properties in Waikīkī, and used that dredged material to clog the springs. Now, this was really part of a larger sort of project to bring people here. Not just any people, though. They were looking definitely for white Americans to settle here. And so this is a quote from a newspaper article. It says, Honolulu desires a population, omitting the consideration of agriculturists, such as has made Los Angeles and other towns of Southern California what they are. Persons and residents of private fortune who seek an agreeable climate and surroundings, and who expend large already acquired incomes, rather than those who expect the community to furnish them the opportunity of earning a livelihood, and even that of the accumulation of wealth. Such persons as we seek desire to find attractive and charming residential districts free from all objectionable features and neighbors. In all cities of refinement, such districts exist, and from the residents thereof come the lavish expenditure and patronage that make the general prosperity of the merchants and all classes dependent on their own exertions. So very clearly we see that they're not just looking for Americans, they're looking for white Americans. They're looking for people that already have money, so that they can come here and spend that money. And then this sentence here, talking about the attractive and charming residential districts free from all objectionable features and neighbors. I mean, I'll leave that to you to think about. But I will say this, that I think that when they're talking about objectionable neighbors, it's likely that they're talking about Native Hawaiians, maybe people that look like me. So when we fast forward, we'll talk a little bit about it, what the results of these land laws are. But one of the results is, I'll give you a spoiler alert, one of these results is segregated neighborhoods, segregated residential tracts. The usurper's government goes ahead and creates the Hawaii Promotion Committee. And it does exactly what it says. It starts to promote Hawaii in a very specific way. You can see it. This is their letterhead. You can see it right at the top of their letterhead. You see, hold on, let me just do this. You see Hawaii, a tourist resort, a place for homes, and the strategic center of the Pacific. Now, this group was created right around 1906 and lives on today, interestingly enough, as the Hawaii Visitor and Conventions Bureau. But you can see that these three goals, right, equate to settlerism, tourism, and militarism. And you can, these three things we know as geographers work together in order to produce like a settler colonial type of or settler privileged landscape eventually. And this is what the Hawaii Promotion Committee did in a lot of different ways. So just a couple of old pictures of Waikīkī. So you can see this is all taro growing here. Taro growing with Laiahi in the background. Again, this is another photo. I apologize for the resolution. These are really old photos. You can see lots of water. There were duck ponds. There were where they raised ducks for selling. There was also, as you can see in this picture, other crops being cultivated on the edges between these lo'i or these wetland patches. So you can see bananas being grown here. It was ideal to grow things on the banks between these different patches because they never had to be watered. The plants were able to access water just from the ground. Okay, so now I kind of want to switch gears to talk about the political climate of the post-overthrow Hawaii landscape. It's really, I think, important to understand how this was part of a larger project. Act 61 was not the only thing going on, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what happens historically. So the 1893 coup and as well as what's called the Land Act, 1895 Land Act, these were really essential in order to facilitate immigration of white Americans to Hawaii and then to remake Hawaii into a settler colonial outpost of the United States. Those are not my words, by the way. Lots of documents that I pulled refer to Hawaii as an outpost of the United States. And then I just want to kind of share this little note here that was found at the Hawaii Mission House's digital archive. This is a note that's coming from John L. Stevens. John L. Stevens is the United States representative. He's what his title is United States Minister he represents the United States here in the kingdom before the overthrow. And he is colluding with the people who eventually overthrow the queen. This note is marked private. It's dated January 17th, 1893, which is the date of the actual overthrow. And it says Judge Dole. It's addressed to Sanford Dole, who is one of the men who exacts the coup. It reads, "I would advise not to make known of my recognition of the de facto provisional government until said government is in possession of the police station." And it's signed Stevens. So this note was written to Judge Dole. This note was written to Sanford Dole before the overthrow happens, and it's instructing him not to tell anybody that he's going to recognize, that the U.S. minister is going to recognize the provisional government, which is the usurper's government. But this was all planned in advance. He's going to recognize the provisional government as being legitimate. And at that point, it will, the queen will have to step down or determine what her next steps are. So Sanford Dole, he very early on is writing about the Hawaiian land policy and what he thinks are the problems. This is part of I think it was 4 articles, a 4-article series talking about the problems with the population in Hawaii from his standpoint. Now, this is written in 1872 when he is still a employee of the Kingdom of Hawaii, the Hawaiian Kingdom government. And so he's part of this is that he says, and there is no less doubt that with our lands brought to a state of careful cultivation and through the economics of a higher civilization than our dusky predecessors could boast, a nation of at least 1 million might in comfort and plenty occupy our islands and make them rich and prosperous. The Hawaiian is not to be displaced, but must be supplemented. Now, again, for context, he's writing this while he's an employee, a government employee of the kingdom. And so he's not coming out while this is, okay, so he's referring to Native Hawaiians as dusky predecessors with a lower civilization of their own compared to their own. So you can see that he's already planting the seeds and already has this vision of Hawaii, remaking Hawaii into a particular type of place. And part of the reason for the, not just the overthrow, but for the 1895 Land Act was that Native Hawaiians had land rights that were codified into law as a result of some of these documents here, the 1839 Declaration of Rights and the Constitution of 1840. These two things determine that all the lands in Hawaii are jointly owned by 3 entities. One is the mo'i, which is the king or the queen. Second is the ali'i, which is the ruling class, the royal class, and maka'ainana, who are the common people. So jointly, these 3 entities, groups of people, own all of the land in Hawaii, right? And so it's important to realize that these codified vested rights of Native Hawaiians really was an issue for them, because these rights, and experts believe that these rights continue today for Native Hawaiians in Hawaii. This provided a problem or an issue when we're talking about titles, land titles, right? So this is a sort of this is an image on how it kind of worked. It didn't work like a pie, right? A lot of times when we're looking at land ownership that's divided among people will describe it like a pie, but actually ours was more like a layered cake. So you had a layered cake, but not all the 3 layers were equal. Okay, so that's a really good way to sort of imagine it. I'm not going to go really deep into this, but just so that you know, these codified land rights really did present a problem for the usurper's government. So in 1893, there's a coup. I think that's by this point pretty common knowledge. And this is just an image of what they called themselves the Committee of Safety. These are the men that overthrew our kingdom government. And you'll see names that are pretty familiar. If you are from Hawaii, people like Henry Cooper, who ends up being the person running the Hawaii Promotion Committee, Lauren Thurston, who is the owner of the newspaper where a lot of those quotes were pulled from, W.O. Smith, the Castles. So you have a lot of very wealthy businessmen, white businessmen here that exact the coup. Now, when we look at what they deemed the threats to their political power, you can very clearly see that the population demographics in Hawaii at the time were problematic for them. So this is in 1890, 3 years before the overthrow. You can see this first column here represents the Native Hawaiian population. The next largest group is the Chinese. The next largest group are Japanese, and here is the group of Caucasians. So basically what this is saying is that Native Hawaiians are still a very powerful political force just by virtue of the fact that they're able to vote. Chinese and Japanese, these numbers quickly grow exponentially over the next few decades. And but the thing is that Japanese, while they don't really, even though their numbers over the next couple of decades grow exponentially because they're being brought over for as indentured labor for sugar plantations. Initially, when they get here, they can't vote. And so that first generation is not of political consequence, really, or they don't pose a political threat to the rule of the usurpers. However, once they have children here, those children are natural born citizens, which then means that they will be able to vote. So the segment of Caucasians that, the people that usurped our queen, they are very concerned about Native Hawaiians in the short term, but also Asians in the long term, and what that's going to mean to their power. And they determine that the best way to even out this threat or to mitigate this threat is by luring white Americans here to build up this particular demographic as a way to build their own voter base. And that's what they try to do with the 1895 Land Act. Actually, they try it. This is their overall goal for the next few decades. Here are some quotes out of the Pacific Commercial Advertiser, which is owned by Lauren Thurston, who was one of the people who participated in the coup. There are hardly 2,000 of us able-bodied men who are trying to hold the fort of white civilization here against 80,000 or more who oppose us. If color is ever to rule Hawaii, which God forbid, that color must be white. So these are two quotes coming from 1898 and 1900. And we're talking about, again, we're really talking about these, how they see themselves and how I suppose this explains a little bit of why they feel like they are hard pressed to start bringing over white Americans to settle here as quickly as possible. After the overthrow, they quickly, they deem themselves the provisional government. And I guess what I should just say very quickly is their government changes names a lot. So right after they exact the overthrow, they call themselves the provisional government. The word provisional is in there because they think that they're going to be annexed to America right afterward. When that doesn't happen, and that's a whole nother webinar, but when that doesn't happen, after 3 attempts at annexation, when that doesn't happen, then they change their name to the Republic of Hawaii, which is a bit misleading because there's really nothing that is democratic about it. But they, illegally take us as without a treaty of annexation. Again, I'm not going to go there, but you can look all of this up. But when the provisional government puts their new constitution into place, they require the oath of allegiance and an oath of allegiance, signed oath of allegiance from various citizens here in Hawaii. They require it if you want to be continue to be a government employee. That would include teachers, police officers, firefighters, even the government royal band here. They had to sign the oath of allegiance or they lost their job. Oath of allegiance was also required in order to vote. It was also required if you wanted to take advantage of what ends up being the territory's homesteading initiative, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. So really, this is the way that they're controlling the residents or the citizens in Hawaii. They're providing economic incentive in order to accept the new government. And really, if this process is successful, then it could help to disarm Native Hawaiians. This is not what happens, though. There are lots of people that lose their jobs and are basically blackballed. And, Native Hawaiians are not willing to sign this oath of allegiance, and they do pay the consequences for it. 2 years after the coup, they put into place something called the 1895 Land Act. And really, the reason for this is because the provisional government / Republic of Hawaii / territorial government, these are all, again, just name changes, either the same players. This is their attempt to deal with the codified Native Hawaiian land rights that are vested. And the other thing that it does is it incentivizes white American immigration in order to take Hawaiian landscapes, both physical and social, and then remake them into a white American settler outpost. Now, I'm just going to sort of gloss over some of the things that the 1895 Land Act does, because this, together with Act 61, is really what helps to reshape all of the land laws that were put into place by the Hawaiian Kingdom. So the initiatives that are established by this Land Act include access to a new land frontier. They combine the government and crown land banks. That was the Queen's or the ruling monarch's personal property. They took that, combined it with the existing government land bank, and created a new land frontier. They reclassified all of the land in Hawaii, which made it easier to valuate. They put into place a territorial homesteading program with 3 different lease types, 2 of which could lead to fee simple ownership. However, the 3rd lease type, which was earmarked for Native Hawaiians, did not allow for ownership of the property at all. It allowed for a very long, cheap lease, but no ownership, which then, of course, disenfranchises Native Hawaiians as landowners and land users. The other thing it did was create these settlement associations. Now, the way that a settlement association worked is if you got together with 15 of your buddies, from America, you decide to move here, and you apply for a tract of land, if you were approved by Sanford Dole, then that meant that you and only the members of your association, your settlement association, you were the only ones that had access to that land. And so there was no way for anybody else to come into this homestead tract without your permission. And the way that this plays out eventually is the most extreme example that I've seen is on Maui, where there were 2 homestead tracts like this that were given to Americans only. They call it an American colony. It's 2,200 contiguous acres that had their own school, had their own churches, had their own Honolulu library branch. So these settlement associations allow for segregated communities, basically. And all of this is pointed out or allowed for by virtue of the 1895 Land Act. And of course, Act 61, while it's not part of the Land Act, it's land legislation that was passed the same year. And we've already talked about the ramifications of Act 61. So these land law changes work, right? They drastically affect population demographics in Hawaii. This very basic graph, shows population growth from 1890 to 1960. And the yellow, this color here, the yellow bars represents Native Hawaiian population. The green represents Caucasian. This rust color represents Chinese, and this brownish color, Japanese. So you can see over the course of these between 1890 and 1960, you have this Caucasian demographic going from this tiny little sliver to this. Basically, the white demographic grows over 2,000% over 60 years. Hawaiians, you can see we're in the middle of a depopulation where we lose, I don't know, experts think anywhere between 60% to perhaps as much as 80% of our population due to disease. So you can see the numbers stay relatively the same, and then they start to grow, and then they start to grow. And then the Japanese, right? I alluded to the Japanese. This was the 1890 figure that we saw, relatively small figure, a small amount of Japanese here, but you can see that the amount of Japanese that the plantations are bringing in as indentured labor just is astronomical. And again, why that's important is because these indentured laborers' children become voters in the course of one generation. So if we want to look at it a different way, this is how, really the overall goal of the usurper's government's land law modifications is the remaking of Hawaii, not just population-wise, but also development-wise. And these pictures show that same time period from 1890-ish all the way to 1960, and you can see the difference. This is the Alawai Canal that I was talking about that they dredged in order to pump all of that fill into this area here in order to clog the springs. All of the surface water from the mountains comes down and empties into this canal, which is actually really disgustingly polluted right now because there's only one way in and out of the canal. Every time it rains, basically, there's a crazy flushing out of this canal into the waters, actually right near where the hotel is that you'll be staying. And then we have brown water advisories. And that's all due to the fact that this canal, again, only has one exit into the ocean. And so any heavy rainfall really results in that those waters being pushed out into Waikīkī. Okay, so these land law changes basically were very closely related to the strengthening of the usurper's governments. Again, the Oath of Allegiance was leveraged. Oath of Allegiance, you actually had to sign that if you wanted to take advantage of any of the territorial homesteading programs as well. It provided economic gains for the supporters, for the government supporters, and facilitated immigration of white Americans as what they thought would be their supportive voter base. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about Lahaina. This is a picture of Lahaina. This is a wetland. Lahaina was a wetland as well. This site here is where King Kamehameha III's home was. It's a place called Mokuhinia. These are the photos that we're most familiar with lately after the fires pretty much devastated and burned down Lahaina town. I think what's really important, though, is to think about the response of what's going on now, responding to these fires and the results of these fires, right? A lot of people were displaced. And a bunch of those people were Native Hawaiian. And I think that it's really important for us to be thinking about how we're going to rebuild. Do we bring back the wetland, right? And you can see in this photo, this is taken in 2019, all of these really dry areas. Traditionally, it was not like that, right? This area here is very dry because the streams that fed this area and back then, this used to be historically, this was all also taro patches, systems that were for food production. How are we going to rebuild? This is what people are talking about right now. Hawaii's in the middle of a housing crisis. We've got here approximately 89,000 short-term vacation rentals across Hawaii, and really only 14,000 of those are legal, which means that we've got 75,000 units unavailable for residents. And I just wanted to play a clip for you. Josh Green, our governor, talking about this situation.
More of our problems in the state of Hawaii, this fire uncovered a clear truth, which is we have too many short-term rentals owned by too many individuals on the mainland. And it is bullshit, and our people deserve housing here. So I would like them to sell to local owners or at least rent long-term to our people so that we can get through these kind of crises.
So that's Josh Green. That's Josh Green talking about the situation that's at hand. There are still people on Maui that are waiting for housing. There's a group of Native Hawaiians that have been camping on the beach. They call it fishing for housing. They're camping on the beach in Ka'anapali still today, months later, waiting for housing. And so the way that this is played out is that the government is trying to give county mayors the ability to call moratoriums or to place some controls over short-term vacation rentals. And so we just last week had a situation where there were testimonies against these proposed controls over these short-term rentals. And I wanted to play a few of those for you as well.
This video contains testimony that might be triggering or upsetting. These are the type of people that show up to dominate the discussion, and we cannot let that happen. We need to show up in full force and fight back. Please listen to these people, listen to their cries, get as angry as I am, and do not let these people that prioritize their profits over our people to continue to extract from us. Please join Lahaina Strong's email list, submit testimony, and show up, whether in person or from your home on Zoom. We all gotta be there. We all gotta show up and have our voices heard because they're making sure that their voices are heard.
We started visiting Maui 15 years ago as a family. And in representing the Kapalua Resort, many of us are the same way. We came to Maui and we fell in love with it, not only for the beauty of the island, but for the warmth of the people. And it got to the point that we wanted to purchase our own place. We wanted to be part of the Ohana. And so we did so. And that's by choice that we want to do this. But in order to afford this, we do have to allow other guests to stay in our properties on a short-term basis. And so therefore we participate in short-term vacation rentals. I asked the committee as we pursue this further, just to think about our core values. And the core values are, we as Hawaiians have always been known to be welcoming and open our arms and embrace people. And I think any actions that we take moving forward in the future should still echo what we do desire to be, not only by definition as Hawaiians, but what we want to be in the future. So therefore, I stand in opposition to 2919.
The short-term rental industry isn't the problem, and it's dishonest to say that we are. Rental income is how families like mine pay for our own affordable housing. In fact, we're working to be part of the solution. Last week, my organization launched a $100 million affordable housing fund on the Big Island called the Ohana Aina Fund that helps aspiring short-term rental hosts to purchase a property of their own.
Or how about families that come here from the mainland because they're coming here to contribute more to the economy and that they're trying to relocate and they're trying to find a house? You think they're gonna be held up in a hotel for a couple of months while they look for a place and pay $400? You people don't understand that.
One, by virtue of my having a property in Wailea, which we use part-time and I plan on retiring there, cannot afford that without short-term rental to share that property. So very unfair to the Aloha spirit. I have a property also in Hawaii, which I may well live in, but if this other rental property is taken away, I won't be able to afford to do that. And I've rented my property in Hawaii to some very friendly folks for 25 years, and we kept it below market value just because we're nice and we want to keep it that way.
No, RFI phone, not.
Okay, so I'm going to stop there only because I know I'm a little bit over time, but you get the idea, right? This is settler colonialism at its best. And I'm not saying that other people shouldn't own property here, but I am saying that there should be housing for the people that are from this place. Very quickly, I wanted to give you an idea of what median home prices are like in Hawaii. We are now over $1 million. And if you think you're getting something fancy for $1 million, you're wrong. This is a picture of a home that was built in 1968 and was remodeled in 2018. This particular house in Pearl City sold in October of last year for $1.1 million. Okay, you're not getting a palatial estate for $1 million. This is what you're getting, a 4-bedroom house that was built in 1968. Another thing that really is affecting our community right now is now we've got the majority of Native Hawaiians living outside of Hawaii. And my family is not, I feel like every Native Hawaiian that I know has family members that are leaving. And the reason for that is that we're being priced out of someone else's paradise. We cannot afford to own homes here. Of my 3 grandchildren, none of them live in Hawaii. Of our 5 children, only 1 manages to live in Hawaii, and we're not alone. This is really something that is that's not going to stop unless we start to see some really big changes in the way that our economy in Hawaii is run. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you so much for listening. I guess really my overall ask of you coming here to Hawaii, once you come here to the AAG, you will be connected, like it or not, you're going to be connected to Hawaii in a way. And I would beg you to consider being an ally for Hawaii and for Hawaii's people. Be a responsible tourist, a visitor, and please just consider the difference that you can make as a visitor here to Hawaii. Mahalo nui.
Well, mahalo to you, Kavelau. That was really excellent research that you've done over the years, and thank you for sharing it with all of us. We have a couple questions, but first a thank you also from one of our other participants, Eric Shepard, who thanks for this really insightful webinar. The question that came from Julie Guthman has to do with the history of voting rights for Hawaiians in Hawaii, really way before statehood, way before overthrow. Can you just kind of give a kind of an evolution of those rights? And I know perhaps for some of our viewers on the continent who are familiar with the Snyder Act, the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, it's being celebrated this year as its 100th anniversary of those rights for Native Americans on the continent, but I'm not sure that applied to Hawaii. So some history, I think, of voting rights in Hawaii would be welcome by our participants here today.
Okay, well, let me just start by saying that if you're talking about before the overthrow, It's important to understand that the Hawaiian Kingdom government was a constitutional monarchy that obtained international recognition by a number of countries. We had dozens of treaties with well over 30 countries. I don't even know the figure. I feel like it's actually higher than that. And so we're talking about a very small place that was a player in the international realm. We were a member of the family of nations. We were a neutral nation. And so let me see this. Before that could happen, we had to have a constitution. And so when I alluded to the Declaration of Rights, the 1839 Declaration of Rights and the 1840 Constitution, that's our first kingdom constitution. That transformed the Hawaiian Kingdom from an absolute monarchy to a constitutional monarchy. And at that point, citizens in the kingdom did have the ability to vote. And we had naturalization processes. So it wasn't just, eventually it's not just Hawaiians that are able to vote. In fact, there were many foreigners that move here that end up giving up their citizenship to places like America and Britain in order to become citizens of the Hawaiian Kingdom. So this transformation, I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that the mo'i, or the king at the time, right? And we did have kings and queens. We had rulers at every level that were women. But at that time, they're giving up their absolute power. They're giving up their absolute power, a lot of it. And that's really for the betterment of their people. They see this move as a way to help protect Hawaii against imperial powers. Around the same time, we've got New Zealand being taken by British, Tahiti being taken by the French. So I believe that our Else's saw the writing on the wall that a small place like Hawaii was really in danger of being colonized and taken over. And so this was a step that they took to be able to ensure or help ensure, help to mitigate that threat, so to speak. I hope that answers the question.
Well, there's a lot more there too, but
Yeah.
I think what you're saying is kind of embedded in the part of one of your slides you had to kind of abbreviate in terms of the depth of discussion, but the layer cake.
Yes.
And go from kind of a land all held in kind of trust by the ali'i on behalf of the people to, okay, what are the rights and how are they different? And it's not like portioning out a flat cake, into independent pieces. These are layers of rights upon the same parcel of land. Any
Right.
more you want to add on that you may not have had time to share during your presentation?
Yeah, I think that I just would like to reiterate that those codified land rights still exist today. And so our land tenure system, everything about our land tenure in Hawaii is very different than most of the people watching are probably familiar with. Those land rights remain today, and they prove to be a real thorn in the side of the usurpers, because they recognized very quickly that these land rights that were not completely divided out meant that every parcel in Hawaii still had this sort of layer of land rights that were given to the common people, or the Native Hawaiians, the common people, the Maka'ainana at the time. And so it really does provide for that. This is one of the things that Sanford Dole and them do when they're doing the 1895 Land Act. Part of that is the ability to perfect titles. That's another thing that Land Act does. And so you see them trying to get rid of that layer. by using land laws. Yeah.
Another way I've heard that described is as a bundle of sticks, that the rights of land really kind of are a bundle, and think of all these individual sticks that represent different rights on that land. And in on the continent, you may have a bundle that's, got 10 sticks in it, but here we reserve certain of those sticks. They were never in your bundle of fee simple ownership at any
Right.
point in time. They were kind of held out of the bundle and really given as a right of access or resource utilization to other people other than the landowner. So if those who are interested, there's a large body of work on this, and it's a fascinating topic. And I think you've utilized I really appreciate the way you had the perspective of going from the depopulation issues to the utilization of what's our threat, either existing or potential threats to that population, like the mosquito, to then leverage other political agendas, whether they're economic or having it based on race and so forth. That if you think about that today, we know that our world is in peril as a place of existence. Are there ways to kind of utilize that peril, or do you see a movement, proceeding? And I'm involved with Polynesian Voyaging Society, where we're trying to bring attention to the need to kind of, no matter where you are from, to bring life and health back to the oceans, which really drive the health of the whole planet. Are there ways to kind of use that same strategy, but in reverse, to kind of utilize the perils of the planet to kind of really invoke policies that better, no matter what the politics are, that really better align with the values that we spoke about? I mean, that system that you described in Waikīkī really understood the way the natural system worked and how to optimize that system on behalf of society rather than manipulate and distort it for some other objective that then you would have to mitigate issues. So is there a way to go back to that the current crisis really enables us to go back to the older way of thinking of a regenerative circular economy and respect for natural systems?
That's a really good question. I was actually part of a discussion group that got together, like a think tank, thinking about, because I'm sure that everybody that's watching realizes that sea level rise is happening, and eventually Waikīkī will be taken back it's going to be taken back by water. And the reason for that, again, is because you can't put up walls, because this was wetland and it's reclaimed land. You can't put up walls because the water's going to come right up from underneath. And so what we know of as today as Waikīkī will be no more. And so this think tank was really trying to think about how can we leverage that in a way to maybe think about going back to some of what was there. It's a really difficult question. And I know that people are really just starting to wrestle with it now. But ultimately, the water's coming. We can't really do anything about that. But I think when we look at Lahaina, because of the fires, this is another opportunity, right? I have a brother who almost died. He and his family almost died in that fire. They ended up on foot because they couldn't get into traffic. No one would let them into traffic. They lived right off of Front Street. They ended up with burns on their feet and their legs. They were only survived because Samoan family said, hop in the truck, and they were able to get out. So while I am horrified, and I'm from Maui originally, while I'm horrified by what has happened with that fire, I also see it as a strange sort of opportunity to rethink, what does rebuilding look like? Do we restore the wetlands? I mean, we know of oral histories that said that there was a food forest there, huge in size, well over 10 acres, where you couldn't even see the sun because the density of the breadfruit trees was so thick that in order to see the sun, you had to go out on the canoe out into the water. Now, when we're talking about that kind of food production, right? Is that something that we can build back in? I think it's really important, considering that right now we bring in more than 90% of our food, which is ironic because almost anything will grow here, but we don't. What do we grow? I don't know. We grow tourism and militarism. It's so I think it's just we can look at these sort of tragedies as beginning points and ways to think about being more circular in terms of rebuilding the places and the society that lives in those places.
Well, your linkage and reference to Lahaina is quite timely and relevant for the conferees who are interested in an issue like this, and more, not just a large issue, but the matter of how you shift a paradigm. In Waikīkī, the interests are so vested that even though the outcome is inevitable, it's hard to give up the interests and so forth. But in Lahaina, those interests were kind of taken away instantly in an instant. And so it creates a little bit of a blank slate, not entirely, but a little bit of a blank slate it's an intriguing case study and test of the ability of our community and political will and economic prioritization to see how we utilize that experience, that tragic experience, to kind of learn and understand how you do shift a paradigm toward a more livable society. So it's going to be, for those webinar viewers and attendees of this conference who are in the field of geography and trying to understand Earth systems and how man exists in these systems in a compatible way that enhances them rather than destroys them and puts man ultimately at risk, then there's lots to study here, and I hope you connect through the subject matter at the conference as well as through meeting people like Kavelau, or perhaps visiting Maui to really better understand this field and how you can contribute to it. This one of the reasons we started this webinar series, Kavelau, was because there were certain forces and constituents within the American Association of Geographers, the stakeholder group and membership, that said maybe you shouldn't visit Hawaii because things of what the work of geographers, the work of certain societal interests, a white society and so forth, has not been kind, and they don't want you there. Well, what we've tried to do is explain why some of that sentiment existed in the first place, and then how to be here, in a day and age where you can come and how to be welcome here and be contributing to society. So I very much appreciate your ending to really offer ways that our conferees can support, be supportive, and be a positive influence in our society. So we're a little bit early today. Anything more that you wanted to add that you felt like, I missed this in the presentation? I wish I had time to say this.
Yeah. A couple of things. One is Act 61 was actually leveraged across Hawaii, not just on Oahu, even though that's how the original legislation was written. And the wetlands in Lahaina were also done away with, leveraging that legislation. It was the way that a lot of fish ponds all around Hawaii were filled in, was leveraging and weaponizing the Board of Health, as a way to sort of change ownership, obtain for the way that the government could obtain land and then turn around, develop it, made a lot of people very, very rich.
Let's build on that though, because I recently saw some research of the Consuelo Foundation here locally called INAVIZ, and it talked about it recorded and kind of compiled lists of organizations that have been, we call INA organizations, the people of our community going back to land features and to kind of restore and revive and revitalize them into a thriving functional feature. And in 1980, maybe there were 20 of those organizations. Today, there's almost 300 across our state of different groups going back to take a fish pond that had been destroyed or allowed to be in ruin and restoring it. So we have as a feature of the conference land engagements, and some of these have been planned by people in the UH system in particular, in the fields of geography and other disciplines, where conferees can go out and visit these systems and learn more about them. And there are some that are just out there. If you have an interest, just talk to people involved with the conference of something that's not on the schedule, if you will. But there's amazing work going on in our community by brilliant community leaders who work very diligently, and bright individuals who have tremendous mastery of their cultural practice and ability to relate to community, who are really bringing people back to the land to restore not just the land, but restore our people to people who aloha aina, who really understand how we should not just be from here, but of here, and contributing to this place.
I'd
And
actually love to
you're here
see
for a lifetime, or you're here for for 4 days
Right.
of a conference, you can make a contribution. I'm sorry, I interrupted
Correct.
you.
No, exactly. You're coming here for a conference, like it or not, you are somehow connected to Hawaii now. And Hawaiians believe that with knowledge comes responsibility. And that's where being an ally, I think, comes in. That's where going out and visiting these organizations that are doing this kind of work, to me, is something that all of the participants can do. Rather than, you can still sit by the pool, you can still go to the beach, but make the time to do these things, because I think that it's really important. And probably you'll learn some things that can be applied to where you're from as well. I just think it's really important to learn as much as you can. This is an academic conference. I really encourage people to do that.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm hoping they'll see you at the conference, or other people from Hawaii attending the conference.
I'll be there presenting.
Awesome. I just want to acknowledge Victoria Lapo and Julie Guthman and Nathaniel Trumbull and Francis Fahey, I think, who expressed appreciation for your presentation today, Kavelau, as well as also kind words about the entire webinar series.
Thank you.
So with that, we conclude not only today's presentation, but the series, and look forward to seeing a lot of people who have been watching, as well as others that we haven't known about, but will be attending this conference here in April. So mahalo nui, Kavelau, for brilliant work and a wonderful presentation, very, very instructive and informative. And aloha mai to all of the attendees of this webinar and the American Association of Geographer Conference. Aloha no.
Aloha.